Hi, everybody. Welcome. So glad you're here. This is going to be a wonderful, wonderful time as we prepare ourselves for this amazing, amazing adventure into microeconomics. We're going to do a little bit of CRAM. My name's Hope Myers. I'm a teacher down in South Florida. I'm excited to host this CRAM with you and get you ready for the exam. I'm drinking some lemon ginger tea tonight. Grab your mug, give it a hug, because here we go, folks. So let's go ahead and talk about Unit 1. Let me share my screen with you. There we go. Unit 1. Just so you know, just a little bit of housekeeping as we go through this. Just so you know, you've got our stream is being recorded, and if you want to use the chat function, please do. It helps. Just know there's your screen name. So again, come think with Think Fiveable. We got some great things, some great support. I'm loving working here, and it's just, we are going to get you ready for this exam. I'm excited, and I hope you are too. Next CRAM session is going to be, we're going to be looking at Unit 2 with supply and demand. We're going to be doing that on March 11th at 8 p.m. That's Eastern Standard Time, folks. And tonight, I've got the chat function open. Here we go. So let's see. We are going to start off with just going through quickly Unit 1.1 or 1.1 going through 1.3. Some of you have already told me that you really want to talk about production possibilities curve. Well, guess what? This is when we do it. And you're going to then show what you know in our Discord. And Sharia, my amazing TA, has been manning that, and she's going to pick up some questions. And I would love for you guys to have a pen and paper in hand and your phone, because I would love to see all your production possibilities curves, and we're going to see if we can work with them, if not during this CRAM session, afterwards. And so we're going to just kind of break this unit into two major parts. We're going to go look at 1.1 to 1.3. We're going to show what you know in Discord, and then we'll have some question and answer time that will come up in the chat, which I can see at that point. And then we'll go into the more tougher stuff with 1.4 and 1.6. We'll show what we know in Discord, and then we'll have a final session for questions. So you might be asking, well, wait a minute, how do I get there? Ta-da! Discord, go for it. So this is kind of my main hub for interacting with you if you need help or if you need questions. Sharia has been really working there already. There's questions of the day for you. You are going to get so much support. And again, we're glad you're here. So you ready? Here we go. We're going to get to work. Let's talk about 1.1. And the name of the game with economics is this concept that you really have to know, which is scarcity. The idea that I can want everything, but I have very limited resources. Our poetry is made from this. This is all of human society. You can't always get what you want. And you sometimes can't even afford what you need, but you want it. It doesn't mean you can have it. That's because you have to make choices. We don't have infinite time. We have to make a choice, and every choice has a cost. And so if you think of that in terms of trade-off, just kind of, again, a lot of economics, folks, you're doing it anyway. We're just going to slap some terms on it and let you study it like a lab. So we're going to look at cost, which is what the producer pays. Again, these are all terms that you should know. I've just got them up there that you can kind of peruse and then like, oh, that's what we mean. A couple of words that sometimes trick people up. Allocate just means distribute, and just how it's distributed. So if you hear about allocation or resource allocation, that's a really fancy term for, oh, who gets that and how much of it did they get? You probably need to know the difference between consumer goods, those are finished goods on the shelf, and capital goods. These are the components that make the goods. Can a consumer good be a capital good? Yes, but it depends. For example, if I buy an oven for my house, that's going to be my consumer good. But if I buy an oven for my bakery, well, then it's a capital good because it's being used to make something else. Marginal in economics means marginal means one more. I've heard some people talk about it being extra. No. One more. Think about how many laps can I run around the field with just one more brick? And you're like, one brick's not bad. 80? A lot. No, thank you. The goal here is efficiency. An economist cupboard in their kitchen is empty. I want to buy just enough flour at the store to make that cake, and I want nothing left over and nobody going hungry. So again, price, what the buyer pays. Utility is a way that we talk about satisfaction. It's kind of the only way it's the closest we ever get to happiness in econ. It's the dismal science for a reason. We've got private sector, public sector. Public sector just means that it's government controlled or it's a government business. Private sector is individually owned businesses. We've got productivity, which is the measurement of efficiency, and opportunity cost, which is the next best thing given up when making a choice. We're going to talk about opportunity cost and trade-off later on. Investment, I put this in asterisks because you really need to know it. Investment in AP economics, it does not mean stocks. It means bonds and macro, but you're in micro. Investment here means a business buying equipment or tools to help their business be better. So it's me buying the truck for my moving business. I am trying to make my business better, so I am going to be using that. Well, guess what, guys? There's more. So 4 factors of production. Memorize these. These need to be in there because they're going to just haunt both micro and macro. When we have 4 factors of production, we are going to put these things together to make different products for use. We've got land, labor, and capital. The entrepreneur then takes those 3 things and makes them even more efficient, or at least more productive. These are all paid and with factor payments. Those are going to become important later, so I'm just going to leave it for you so you know. Things to remember with capital, there's 2 types of capital. Physical capital, which is like machines and robots. That's one spatula you really like. That helps make goods. It's stuff that helps out. Human capital is actually what you're doing right now. Human capital is the training, it's the education that hopefully can make your employees be more efficient. Rule of the game, everybody has their own personal dreams. Everybody's pursuing their own self-interest. If everyone's doing the same thing, you're all pursuing self-interest, then I can actually make formulas out of it. I can make predictions because there is a consistent payoff. Sound familiar? Yeah, this is why it's a social science, because we did put the scientific method right on top of this, of human behavior. People chase profit, not total revenue, but people are going to chase profit. How do I find the profit? Well, I take the total revenue, subtract total cost, I get my total profit. All right. The drive for any business is going to try to keep the cost low and keep the profit high. Everybody does this. When you're studying for that wonderful micro exam, what do you want to do? You want to keep the hours low for studying, and you want to keep the grade as high as possible. So let's go ahead and look at 1.2. This is 1.1. Everybody should be feeling comfortable with. Maybe you can talk in Discord if 1.1 is really struggling. Maybe some questions there if you want to get ready for that. But let's go on to 1.2 because this is where it gets a little trickier. Every society has to ask itself, and every economy has to ask itself 3 major questions, or what we call the big economic questions. What goods and services should be produced? How should the goods and services be produced? Who should get the goods and services? These 3 questions and how they're answered, because is there an incorrect answer to this? Usually it's from the other side. But how a society asks this question and how they answer it, that is where we're going to get cultures. The culture answers this. For example, in some cultures, you don't want to have anyone under 18 working. Or in some cultures, you're thinking, well, you should be in college from 18 to 22. And others no. And others, you're going to work. That it's who should be producing, who should get this stuff. So how a nation answers these questions determines the economic system. So number 1, we have what's called the free market system. The free market system, we have 4 major components. In my very poorly drawn components, I'm going to walk you through it. So the 2 boxes, top box stands for product market. The lower box top box stands for factor market. Lower box stands for the product market. The smiley face, that's your household. The rest called families, individuals. And that L-shaped object was a really bad rendition of a factory. And so that is going to be that's your firm or a business. So if you want to skip ahead, this is my key to all this. For a free market system, you'll see there's no government in the middle. So take the government part, erase it, and it's just pure flow between households and firms through the product market and through the factor market. So households give their labor to the factor market. Let you see it from this end. Household gives their labor to the factor market. Businesses buy that labor using income. They then are going to sell, or they're going to put together a product, sell that product or that good and service on the product market. Households then pay it back or pay money for it. Big thing you need to know with circular flow is that money goes one way and goods and services go the other. The command system is where the government controls everything. The government answers those questions. Before, in the big economic questions within the free market system, individuals and society will answer those questions. In the command system, government gets to answer those questions. Most economies, with probably the exception of two, borrow from both of these systems in what's called a mixed economy. Basically, you have goods and services flowing one way, money flowing the other, but government is going to regulate things like OSHA, for example, labor laws. They may watch for pay. They may regulate who gets to buy those products or who has to pay those products, minimum wage, those kind of questions. That's government at work. Your favorite thing, I remember all these things. Okay, let's talk about production possibilities curve. And I want you to get that paper out, and you are going to show your PPC in the Discord. So production possibilities curve, it's going to show, it's also called a production possibilities frontier. Don't be fooled. On the test, it may present it as both names. It's kind of like when you have a nickname, it's both names are legit, but they can be different, but they can use either one. So get ready for that. There are two types of production possibilities curve, and we have to make some assumptions. We have to assume that only that this land or this country is only going to be making two products. Great. All right. So in this case, we've got apple pie and cherry pies for Bakerland. All right. They can make 10 apple pies, or they can make 10 cherry pies. They could also make 5 apple pies and 5 cherry pies. They can make something in the middle. As long as they're on the line, they are being efficient. Notice that line is linear. It's not bowed out like you see with Landia. In Bakerland, if you look at it, Bakerland has a straight line. This is why it's called constant opportunity cost. It means that the opportunity cost, we will get there, don't worry. The opportunity cost for one more good, for one more apple pie is going to be one more cherry pie. So if you look at the graph, if it's 10 and 10, it means and if you think about it, it makes sense. It's like I've got one oven in Bakerland. I'm going to put I can put one apple pie in per hour, or I can put one cherry pie in per hour. I can't put both, so I have to choose. Well, I know Bakerland wants more cherry pies, so you know what? I'm going to make 7 cherry pies and 3 apple pies. It will be allocated equally, but the cost, the opportunity cost, the thing that's given up. So to move from let's say 10 apple pies to 9 apple pies with 1 cherry pie is the loss of that 1 apple pie. Now that's constant opportunity cost, meaning the opportunity cost is equal. It descends down. The production possibilities curve you're going to deal with in micro and most of macro is going to be bowed out. Why is it bowed out? Because it's the law of increasing opportunity cost, that as I make decisions to make one more of something else, I am giving up even more. Think of this. You've got a test for micro in a couple, let's say a couple of days. You can study, if you decide, I'm going to study 5 hours straight. Great. What is the opportunity cost of studying just 1 hour, full on, no social media? I'm really just focusing. I'm just going to study. Well, you're going to miss a show. Maybe you're going to miss talking with your friends for a little bit. You're going to give up some things. All right. What about 2 hours straight of study? My eyes would go crossed at this point, but 2 hours straight of studying is a lot. So what we're going to do is you're giving up more. What about 3 hours or 4? That fourth hour of just looking at your textbook or looking at the fiveable slides, just one more. You're losing sleep at this point. You're giving up a lot more for that fourth thing. So, or for that fourth hour and into that fifth. So let's go ahead and let's play a little bit. Oh, here you go. Assumptions here, only 2 goods produced. You've got full employment of resources. Nobody's holding anything out. And your factors of production are fixed, meaning that everything's equal. We've got the same amount of laborers. It's like a snapshot in time. Also, technology is fixed at this point. Okay, so that means I've got a nice picture. This is going to matter more in macro than in micro, but it still bears repeating. So this is, if you're going to take macro later, you're going to see this pop up a lot. So in 1.3, you're going to have, let's say we're taking Randima at this point. We have capital goods and consumer goods. We will see more developed nations focus more on capital goods. And why? Because capital goods make other consumer goods. So if we want to focus on anything, we want to focus towards capital goods and not so much for consumer goods. This is why you have nations like the United States or Great Britain, or you've got even China at this point, really starting to move into capital goods production. Why? Because they can get their consumer goods produced in other nations who are also developing, but they're getting them produced in other places so that they can focus on capital goods. Now, if you were inside, efficiency is that 9 and 8 there, there's nothing wrong with that. That happy face, that's efficient. There's nothing left over. If I'm producing 6 bits of capital goods and 4, well, I'm losing out because I'm not doing enough. I'm a lacrosse coach, and we would call this is lollygagging. You're just walking around. No, we want your full effort. But do I want you sprinting if you're a marathon runner? No, I don't want you outside the production possibilities curve either. On the line is efficiency. We want it on the line. We are going to push you to be on the line. But can you shift the production possibilities curve? And the answer is absolutely. So, and this is where people make their money, because with production possibility curve, 3 major shifters. And if you're taking macro later on, keep this in mind, because these are going to shift your long run aggregate supply as well. So you've got changes in technology, changes in resources, such as the quality or the quantity, and trade. Trade can kind of cheat around some things. Now, I want you to think, what would happen if Landia's production possibilities curve if apple trees suffered a terrible disease? Well, it's not that there isn't apples available. There's just not as many trees to make the apples. Hence, we've taken away. It's not that people are leaving apples on the tree, that people are just unemployed. The actual production possibilities curve is going to shift inward because there's less apple pie. Now, they're making rowboats over there. This is that consumer good versus this is consumer goods in this one. But you have Landia is going to have to shift downward in that apple pie. Now, since the apple trees aren't going to be used most for rowboats remain unaffected. All right. Let's go ahead. I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Go ahead and get your phones. Go ahead and get your production possibilities curves. And you are going to go talk with Sharia in Discord. You have 2 minutes. I want you to draw a production possibilities curve graph for the country of New Zealand, and they're only going to produce circuit boards and butter. Draw what happens to the production possibilities curve if New Zealand's birth rate increases, meaning way more people. So go ahead, you're on the clock. 1 minute. All right, we got a PPC. Yeah. I got one in Discord. Way to go. Nine seconds. Come on, get those PPCs on Discord. All right, time's up. Let's go ahead and see what the answer should be. So if we were, most of you, I see one person almost had it right, is we got our gator graph. So we've got our big quadrant 1 graph. More people means more stuff needed and the more stuff to make it. We are going to shift that to the right. So we are going to push it to the right, and it means, and this actually explains, if you want to go into a push, this actually explains why we see such a jump in the 1960s and 1970s after the birth of what we call the baby boomers. You guys call them boomers a lot, but that's why they're called boomers. They were part of the United States baby boom, and that made the PPC of the United States theoretically shift to the right. All right, let's get going. So let's talk. I've got the chat open. I'm watching questions for 1.1 and 1.3. So for production possibilities curve, maybe a definition. There we go. Any questions? Go ahead and throw them in chat. Those are not terrible lines. You did wonderfully. All right, I'm standing by. Let's see. Awesome. I love it. We're getting it. See, this isn't tough. We can do this. Let's go to 1.4. And this is the one, don't be scared of 1.4. Oh, okay, here we go. You bet. Let me go back, because that's a wonderful question. And it's one of those that we are going to actually be talking about in a second. Law of increasing opportunity cost means that for the choice that I'm taking, or for the adding of one more thing, it is going to cost me more than I paid before. If you understand that concept, that if I eat the one piece of pizza, it's delicious. If I eat two pizza pieces, I'm good. I'm full at that point. 3, I'm a little sick. 4, puking. So I am going to, that for every, was the piece of pizza different in and of itself? No, it's just that I had already had 3 previously when I ate the 4th. And so that opportunity, the cost that I gave up, like of not being sick, it kind of grows and grows and grows. So let's see. And I may explain that a little better, because when we get into comparative advantage. Hey, look at here. So let's talk about specialization. So you notice that with the production possibilities curve, that when a country has to give something, they have to give something up to produce something else. That you can't produce everything at infinite amounts. You have to make a choice. Most graphs, just to answer your question, usually no, Amanda. That's actually a really good question, and most of the times they're held constant. The one that you're going to have to, the problem is with personal finance. Personal finance uses the term investment a little differently. And you will see, but it's just emphasis. For example, with macro, you're going to look at different things a little tougher. You're going to look at things a little differently, and you're going to focus on them. And for example, if in micro, we're going to be looking at individuals and businesses and how they make a decision. In macro, you're looking at governments and how they make a decision. Let's see if you cost. Excellent. Yes, and I would agree. You will have a few times my students have discovered the gift of a constant opportunity cost, but it's not all the time. Don't trust it. You know both, and get ready for the boat out. Go out for a law about increasing opportunity cost. It's the one they love. So let's talk to understand opportunity cost when we're looking at how nations will trade. Because if they specialize, it means, for example, in the United States, we used to make TVs here. We used to be the TV manufacturer, but we've decided to give that up to other nations like Japan in order to specialize on something else, usually the components that go into the TVs. So specialization allows us to focus in on one item, for this example, or a few items, and then we'll just let we'll make other nations make those goods, and then we'll just trade. We'll trade with each other. 1.4, I have found, trips students up a lot, and don't let it scare you. We're just going to carefully walk through this, and you'll have it before you know it. There's a couple of little curveballs they throw at you, and that's why you have to pay attention. So let's first give you a formula that you're going to need, and that's opportunity cost per unit. I need to know what one thing is worth. And the way I get this is I'm going to take the opportunity cost, which they'll usually give you, with the units gained. So if we're talking about comparative advantage, we're talking about nations trading with each other. Absolute advantage is the raw data. The country who can just produce the most items using output, or produce them with the least amount of resources, which is the input method. Let's go ahead and take a second, because this is where everybody gets confused, and talk about output versus input. Input efficiency, we're talking about using the least amounts of resources. So who can do this? Who can run this race the quickest? So when you guys compare quiz grades or test grades, and somebody goes, oh, well, I got an A on that, and you know what? I did it the night before, and you're like, oh man, you were input efficient. So that was the input approach to that. Output, think more like a soccer game. All right, how much you can produce using identical resources. So who wins the soccer game when everybody has an equal playing field, equal amount of players, everything equal, and hopefully refs that are equal as well. All right, or who can crank out the most DBQs in an hour for a push, and whereas I can barely get one done and I teach it. So absolute advantage is the raw data. So if somebody wins the 100-meter dash, they are producing that 100 meters with the least amount of resources, in this case, time. If we're talking about output, I can produce 18 apple pies versus Sam's 3. I would have absolute advantage. But absolute advantage doesn't necessarily mean that you should just produce things yourself, because again, you may be able to produce more if you trade with another country or trade with another person. This is what we call, to find this though, we got to look at opportunity cost over the units gained. We got to look at the per unit opportunity cost. And this is where we get comparative advantage. This is the country that can, for example, comparative advantage. This is the country that can produce the good for the lowest opportunity cost. So if you're looking at input, you're looking for the lowest number for absolute advantage, and output, you're looking for the highest number to see who has absolute advantage. With comparative advantage, you're always going to be looking for the lowest number. Now, what they trade, the agreed upon amount, is going to be called the terms of trade. So that's the country's agreement of exchange of goods, which benefits both countries. Be careful here. It's a range. There's not one correct answer. It's a range of a couple correct answers, but there's a definite limit to it. So let's go ahead and take a peek. Everybody ready? Here we go. So for comparative advantage, let's say we've got number made in an hour. If shoes versus purses. And I've got country X and country Y. Country Y, if they just focus on shoes, can make 10 shoes. If they just focus on purses, meaning they make 0 shoes, they can make 5 purses. Country X can make 20 shoes, or they can make 20 purses. They can't make 20 and 20 because then they'd be outside the production possibilities curve. So what I want you to do, it's a number made in the hour. So is this input or output? What should each country import and export? And what are the terms of trade? Real quick, we're just going to take a minute or two. Actually, we'll just take a minute. I'm looking at the clock. Let's take a minute and see how far you can get. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a peek. It's not been quite a minute, but let's see if we're on the right track. Some of you are like, yeah, we got this. Some of you are like, whoa, here we go. So is this input or output? If we're talking about the number made in an hour, then it's equal amount of time, equal number of resources. It's how much you can crank out. So if we're going to look at this, this is an output method. And so the hint here is that with output, I think, ooh, all right, output, ooh, in which every econ teacher loves to say this. It means output, the other goes over. Just a way to think about the per unit opportunity cost. So what should each country import and export? Okay, let's get our terms right here. To import something means that the country brings it in, that it's going to buy it from the other country. To export something, like exhale, that you're going to breathe out. Export means I am going to sell it. I'm going to send it to another country. I'm going to export it. So in this situation, the other goes over. Now, country X has done us a favor because they've done 20 and 20, which means other goes over. I've got 20 purses that are going over 20 shoes, which one shoe then is going to equal one purse. They've also that means that if I flip it, it's still the same. So one purse is going to equal one shoe. Oh, if a comparative advantage question pops up on the test, they do that kind of easy math because you're not going to have a calculator and they need you to do this quickly. So they're going to give you, hopefully they will give you one that's where the math is just pretty simple. So in the other situation you have with country Y, it can produce 10 shoes and five purses. So I want you to think, who has absolute advantage? Who has absolute advantage in the production of shoes, i.e., who can just make more? Country X can make 20 shoes, whereas country Y can make 10 shoes. Well, the one with the absolute advantage, 20 is more than 10, so it's going to be the 20 shoes. With purses, country X can make 20, and country Y can only make 5. So once again, you have 20 is more than 5. So country X actually has absolute advantage in both production of shoes and purses. Great. So should country X just produce everything on its own? Well, let's check out the opportunity cost, the per unit opportunity cost. That means, so I do the other goes over. So 1S equals 1P, 1P equals 1S. For country Y, though, the other goes over. The 5 purses are over. If I want to find out what one shoe is worth, I take the 5 purses, the opportunity cost, over the units gained, 10, which is going to equal 1S is going to equal 1/2 or 0.5 of a purse. Whereas with purses, other goes over. So that 10 shoes are divided by the 5 purses. So 1P or 1 purse equals 2 shoes. Okay, now we got some things. Now you'll see, now I can compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. So 1S, if I'm looking to see who has the lowest opportunity cost, per unit opportunity cost in the production of shoes. Well, country X, 1S equals 1P. It costs to produce that one shoe, it's costing country X 1 purse. Whereas for country Y, their one shoe production only costs them the production of a 1/2 a purse. So who has comparative advantage here? Even though country X has absolute advantage, country Y has comparative advantage. That's why it's in yellow. For purses, we have country X, which one purse equals one shoe. But if you look at country Y, even though it's making less purses, one purse is going to equal 2 because it's 10 over 5. The other goes over 10 shoes over 5 purses. So to produce one purse, that country Y has to give up 2 shoes. So in this circumstance, you have country X not only having the absolute advantage of having 20 purses produced, they also have the comparative advantage because their purse they are only giving up a shoe for it, whereas country Y is giving up 2 shoes. Not real good. So what are the terms of trade? I'm going to keep this really simple for you guys so that you actually can do well on the test with it and not have to think about it so much. Pick one. If you get confused, don't try to make everything balanced. Just pick one. So if it's shoes, go with shoes. If it's purses, go with purses. So what you want to do is you want to find out, let me just find one. Usually the test will give it to you. In this case, let's go ahead. What are the terms of trade in terms of shoes? So, and that means let's find out, in terms of purses, what is one purse worth? And purse first, I know. So if we're looking at purses, 1P for country X is worth 1 shoe. 1P for country Y is worth 2 shoes. When we talk about terms of trade, we're talking about a trade between the two where both countries benefit from this. So we're looking at, let's say it's got to be between 1 shoe and 2 shoes. So what is a nice in between the two? Hey, 1.5, done. It's the correct answer is a range. How did they pick 1.5? Negotiation. And that's where a lot of people make some money on those negotiating tables. So they are going to negotiate the trade in an answer. 1.5 would benefit both. If you had if 1P equaled 3S as the term of trade, the parties would not benefit because 3S So the terms of trade, if you have, let me back up. Comparative advantage, if you are in yellow, so in this situation, country X, since they have comparative advantage with purses, I forgot, I didn't point this out and I should have, I'm sorry. My apologies. If they have comparative advantage in purses, then they should only produce purses and then trade, they export purses and they trade or import shoes from country Y. Likewise, since country Y has comparative advantage with shoes, it's just less opportunity cost, they should only produce shoes and then import purses from country X while exporting shoes to country X. The terms of trade is what a deal that would be mutually beneficial to both of them. If it's 3 shoes, well, who has comparative advantage? Who's making shoes? Well, your friend country Y. So if everything is worth 3 shoes, well, the purses may actually get country X may actually get a deal on this. Country Y would be easier for them to just do it themselves. And that's the whole point. We want a deal where both parties sort of win here. And what it does, it actually pushes out the production possibilities curve. Let's go through another one. Hours to make. Is it input or output? Which country should import and export? And what are the terms of trade? If you are watching this on replay, go ahead and hit pause. But we are going to forge ahead. So if it's hours to make 20 shoes or hours to make 1 shoe, we've got the same numbers here, same situation, but hours to make is an input question. It's input. With input, we think IOU. Input, other goes under. So very similar. This is why people get mixed up a little bit. Input means other goes under. So we do the same thing. Now, country X makes things easy for us because it's the same. It's 20 over 20. So 1S equals 1P, still the same. But country Y, we have with shoes, little different story here because now the other goes under. So now I've got my units gained, which is 10 shoes, divided by the opportunity cost. And you're like, well, why are they flipping it? Because they're trying to show that inverse relationship. That and for both, because they do this little flip, that's why we can look at the lowest opportunity cost with comparative advantage. This is why the little flip is there. So again, same deal. We have country X though, different story. If it takes them 20 hours to make one shoe, who has comparative advantage? Well, that's country Y. If it's purses and it takes them 20 hours to make, oh, I messed that up. I'm so sorry. This is supposed to be how many shoes that we could, how many hours to be made in a shoe. And I will change that on the slides. I just realized that. My apologies. So again, my apologies. The top part should say hours. And now I know what to do for the next CRAM. So when we're looking at input and we're looking at the hours made to produce those shoes. So again, if I'm so sorry, we need to strike that one off. That was an edit blooper. But hours to make shoes, if it takes me 20 hours to make it, that's not going to work. So if it's then 10, it's more efficient than 20. So with input, the other goes under. So in this situation, that still one shoe is equaling one purse for country X. Country Y, you're going to have one shoe equaling two purses. And you're like, wait, why did it flip? Because we did its input, because it's the amount made in an hour. Or I'm sorry, it's the amount of hours used to make this. My apologies, I'm fooling myself. So again, what are the terms of trade? Same thing. Now let's go with unit. We've got, let's see, looking at the time. Oh, I'm okay. Let's see. We're going to go with 1.5 real quick. And hopefully, so I just caught a question in chat and I'll go back. So once again, with this one, I made a little mistake. By little mistake, I mean giant mistake. This, if it were just number made an hour, that would be output. For input, this should say hours needed to make. So hours needed to create one shoe or one purse, which would make a lot more sense for input. So we've got, and the reason why they're going to flip it is because we're going to see the lowest opportunity cost. All right, 1.5. This is where it gets really fun and we start looking a lot like the micro that you're going to come to know and love. So big terms here, trade-off, everything we give up to make a choice, you being here as opposed to being off with your friends, eating a nice dinner somewhere or breakfast, depending on where you are in the world. You being here, you've given something up. There's a trade-off for that. Opportunity cost is the next best option given up when we make a choice. It is a trade-off, but not all trade-offs are opportunity cost. So for example, I could be grading papers right now. That would be my opportunity cost for working with you guys, which is fun. But my next best option would be to grade some papers tonight. It's not, I'm going to be abducted by space aliens. So that could be a trade-off, but it's definitely not an opportunity cost. It's the one next best thing. Now, think of when we talk about cost, you need to know cost is anything that, cost and price are different things. Price is what we sell something for. Cost is how much it costs us to make. Well, how much are we going to spend to make a good? There's explicit costs. These are the known costs, otherwise known as a price tag. Like if I've got if I'm going for groceries, that receipt is all the explicit costs. The implicit cost is everything that I've given up. It's what I could have done instead of driving to the store and waiting for Instacart. It's what I could have done. It's adding in all those opportunities that I missed. It's things that I've given up. When we're looking at economic cost, this is an accounting cost. So economic cost is going to be implicit cost plus the explicit cost. So when we're talking about cost in economics, it's always going to be higher than what we would think of as like accounting cost. The couple of questions will be like, well, won't these companies make a profit? Yes, don't worry. They will make a profit. Don't worry. But it's an accounting profit. but it won't take into effect what they've given up. And so that's why economics is so much fun. We get to add the implicit and the explicit together. Marginal benefit. Marginal, you remember that from 1.1. It means to add one more. What happens with one more? Marginal cost is the cost of one more. So again, utility equals satisfaction, and the law of diminishing marginal utility means the more you eat of some, or the more you consume, buy, whatever, it means you're going to feel less satisfaction for each thing's given, or for each thing that you've gained. I use pizza as an example, or ice cream. I'm an ice cream fan. And let's go ahead and say I'm going to look at my benefits as the amount of money I'm willing to pay for that first ice cream cone. And you know what? It's hot in Florida. We love it, but it's hot. You know what? I am so hungry and I so want an ice cream cone. I'm willing to pay $10 for it. And you know what? I ate that cone. It was worth every cent. So I ate the first one. It was delightful. But when I get to that second one, I'm less willing. I'm less satisfied with it, but it's still worth $9. It's very good. As I eat the 10th cone, I'm sick. The same thing with the cost. The cost is also going up. Not only as I'm eating more ice cream cones, I'm getting more nauseous, I'm losing more money. It's not going well for anybody. So this is why we want to find the sweet spot. We want to find what we call equilibrium. Equilibrium is a very, very tenuous place, that it's a delicate place. Usually you don't know if you're at equilibrium until you've passed it. Equilibrium means I have just enough. I am satisfied, and if I don't have any more, I'm good for today. That point and that part is where marginal benefit equals marginal cost. That is going to be burned into your brain for the rest of both micro and macro. That lovely spot of where MB equals MC, that's where you need to stop. I needed to stop eating that ice cream cone, or I needed to stop eating at the 5th ice cream cone. Sounds excessive, but it's that's the magic. Let's see. Oh, Michelle, what a great question. Now, some of you have read ahead. So some of you are going, doesn't that look like the demand curve? Yes, it absolutely is. Guess where we're transitioning to in Unit 2? So yes, marginal cost and marginal benefit, they are going to change their names to supply and demand in Unit 2. But it's okay. Call them Clark Kent right now. Clark Kent and Bruce Wayne. We haven't seen their superpowers yet. All right. Don't give away who they are. All right. So let's go into the last part here. We've got about 12 minutes, and I want to have some places for questions here. Unit 1.6 is a little bit of a toughie. Okay. So Unit 1.6, we're going to take what we learned in 1.5 and we're going to put it together. And so this is where we get marginal utility. How much like happiness or satisfaction is a good way of saying it. We measure it in utils. My own students will talk about their utils and how many utils they have during a test. Hint, it's not very many. How many utils of satisfaction are gained by one more? And this is where we get into the utility maximization rule. This is another way for saying this is getting the biggest bang for your buck. Everybody does this. It just now has a term you can use. And this is where, if we look at the marginal utility of good X over the price of good X, is going to equal the marginal utility of good Y and the price of good Y. But you're like, how do we do this? Well, we've got to figure out the marginal utility per dollar. So, and the way to find that is I just take the marginal utility, trust me, they will give you one of these, and the price. So let's go ahead and I want you to picture a concession stand. You go up to the concession stand, you have $8. So let's go ahead and, go to the concession stand. You've got $10. All right. So it's going to cost you, Twinkies are going to cost $1. Nachos cost $2. So how would you maximize your utility with $10 at a concession stand? So how are we going to do this? Math. All right, so we're going to do a little math here. So let's go back real quick. And remember, marginal utility over price, that's what our marginal utility per dollar is going to be. For my friends who are not in the United States, AP is really working on its international mindedness. It's one of their proponents, but they will still use the idea of per dollar. Just think currency, just think of one of the currencies that, and then use that. So we're going to we use an American dollar a lot for AP just because of who's taking AP for the most part. So in this situation, the marginal utility of that first Twinkie, all right, so unit of Twinkies, 1. The marginal utility of a Twinkie is going to be 8. All right, now what do we have to do? We have to divide that marginal utility by the price. So I'm going to take 8 and I'm dividing it by 1, and what do I get? 8. Nachos, on the other hand, one of those equals $2. So I'm going to take that $2 and divide it by 20. So what is the marginal utility per dollar? 10. If I take the second Twinkie, I'm going to have 14, right? Second Twinkie, that's only going to give me 7, right? But think the per unit cost. So let's go ahead and take a peek. So I'm dividing, again, that one more utility of Twinkies. That is just, it's one. So it gives me the marginal utility. I'm going to divide it by that dollar. And so I'm going to get marginal utility per dollar is going to be 8, 7, 6, and 5. Sound pretty easy? They usually give you one of those, folks. With marginal utility for nachos, though, I have to divide it by 2. Why? Because the nachos themselves cost $2. So marginal utility may sound enormous at 20 utils. You're like, whoa, but I got to divide it by 2. So it's 10. It's comparable. So ignore the yellow. Let's pretend. So ignore the yellow, and which one would you rather have? Well, if I'm comparing marginal utility per dollar, I definitely want that 10. I definitely want 10 utils. So I'm going to get that first nacho. I got $10. I'm going to use it. I'm going to get that first nacho. There goes 2 of my dollars. Then I'm going to get the second nacho because it's 9 utils per dollar, or marginal utility per dollar. It's 9. So because I've taken that 18, I've divided by the $2 for the nachos, and I want that 9. Well, I want the third too, because if I take those 16, that marginal utility of 16, divide it by the $2 price, I get 8. But I still got money left over because I've only used $6. I've got $4 left. Well, now I want the next best thing, which the only thing left is that $8. I want that first Twinkie because it's 8 utils. Yay, I'll take it. And then I want to grab the second Twinkie because it's 7. And notice what happens. I want to grab the fourth nacho because, and if we add it up, 1, 2, 3, 4 nachos times 2, we've got $8. And then the 2 Twinkies at $1 a pop, that's going to be $2. There's my $10. So my correct answer here is going to be, I'm going to get the most bang for my buck with 2 Twinkies and 4 nachos. Now, here's the cool thing. Notice how it ended with 7s. I have for Twinkies, it ended with the same number, the same marginal utility per dollar as it does for the nachos. And this, come back. And this is why we go back. I'm going to go back to the utility maximization rule. Okay, so the utility maximization rule. So in this case, the marginal utility per dollar of good X, the Twinkie, over the price X, at the very end, these should equal each other. For us, it was 7, which equaled the marginal utility of Y over the price of the Y, which in this case was nachos, would equal 7 as well. 7 equals 7. All right, what I'd like you to do is we've got 6 minutes left, and I want you to take a shot at this one. Let's go ahead. We've got cars and refrigerators. We've got country alpha, country delta. Is it input or output? It's the months to make 1 million, either cars or refrigerators. And what should each country import and export? And what are the terms of trade? So I am going to, and that is correct there, I am going to give you a minute just to see how much you can do. All right, if you are standing by and if you are watching this on replay, go ahead and pause. We'll be back. But for the rest of us, we've got 14 seconds. All right, let's see how we did. All right, so it's months to make $1 million. Well, I finally got it right, folks. This is an input question. So this is input. If it takes 8 months for alpha to make a car, but it takes delta 4 months or to make 1 million cars, and it takes delta 4 months to make a million cars, delta's got the absolute advantage because it's input. If you've got, but for refrigerators, this is an interesting one that the test will throw at you occasionally, which is what happens if they're equal? Who has comparative advantage when both alpha and delta are going to make the same amount of refrigerators? And the answer is neither of them have absolute advantage in this situation. It's equal. But if neither of them have absolute advantage, does that mean they don't have comparative? Somebody doesn't have comparative advantage? And the answer is, let's find out. We got to do some math. So with a little bit of math, we're going to see, remember with input, that IOU. Input, the other goes under. So which country should import and export? Well, look at alpha. Alpha is going to need to be able to, alpha is either making 8 cars or 8 refrigerators. So 1 car is going to equal 1 fridge. Apparently, I forgot the R. So 1 car is going to equal 1 fridge. All right, and 1 fridge is going to equal 1 car. Great. For delta, the other goes under. So if they can produce 4 cars, they're then going to put that in the top part. We've got refrigerators, they make 8, so the other goes under, so it's 4 over 8, so we have 1/2. 1 car is going to equal 0.5 of a fridge. And then we have, for refrigerators, 1 fridge is going to, because other goes under, so 8 refrigerators over the 4 cars, and you are going to months, and you are going to get 1 fridge is going to equal 2 cars. So let's go back and compare apples to apples now. 1 car for alpha, for every car they produce, it is going to cost them a fridge. But for delta, every car they produce, and we did this, and this is why we do the math the way we do when we flip things around. For every car they produce, it only costs them half a fridge. They have the lower opportunity cost, so we would say that they have comparative advantage. Same thing with, very similar with refrigerators. Even though they produce the same amount, it only costs alpha 1 car versus delta's 2 cars. So alpha has comparative advantage to refrigerators. It should give up trying to produce cars, just focus on refrigerators, and it's going to export refrigerators and import cars. Delta is going to just focus and specialize on cars, and then it's going to export cars and import refrigerators. So what are the terms of trade? Well, let's pick one. So in this case, let's go ahead and pick refrigerators. So 1 refrigerator, the range is going to be between 1 car versus 2 cars. So what's a nice in between? 1.5. You're like, well, wait a minute, Hope. Can we do 1.3? Yes. Can you do 1.1? Yes. Got a terrible negotiator there, though. But you've got, you can do it as long as it's within the range. So 1 to 1.5 should be a good one. So what I'd like to do, we have 1 minute left. I'm going to see if I can answer some questions in here. Let's see. All right. Oh, man, Sharia, you're just doing great. If you are watching in chat, you are watching Sharia be amazing. She's doing a great job. All right, let's see some. Okay, and so Roma, again, this is going to be an input question because it takes least amount of time. So think of swimming even. Who wins the race? The one that takes the least amount of time to get there. Everybody's got to do the same thing, but they're doing it in the least amount of time. Absolute advantage has to do with how easily or how much people can make more than others, if it's an output situation, like who can produce the most with the same amount of resources, that's output. Input is going to be who can produce this static amount with the least amount of resources, mostly being time. Can I do it with the least amount of time or the least amount of acres? Will we be given what to solve in terms of trade? They will lead you up. Usually they will lead you up to what I showed you before, kind of like what is comparative, which one should import one, which would export, with some of the practice questions. And sometimes they'll give you terms of trade. There will only be one that's within the range. All right, guys, if you want to hang out on Discord, I know we've got some trivia, I believe. And thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight. I really appreciate it. And I'm so glad we're in this journey with micro together. So we're going to get you through it. And I hope to see you on Discord. And I hope you just have a fantastic night. I'm going to finish my tea here. And I hope you have some great tea at home as well. Have a great night, guys. Thank you.